Welcome, dear students. Today we'll be reading and discussing the poem Spelling by Margaret Atwood. Margaret Atwood is a poet, novelist, critic. She has won many awards, including Man Booker Prize for Literature, and she's called the prophet of dystopia. She's actually a very influential voice in our generation. She has wrote many novels like The Edible Woman, Surfacing, The Blind Assassin, for which she got that award, and she has wrote very interesting novels like The Handmaid's Tale and many collections of poems. And the poem that we are dealing with is Spelling. As we already discussed, the poems that we are learning in this paper, Women's Writing, from the anthology Breaking the Silence. We have seen that most of the poems that we are dealing with, it's about female creativity. The musical instruments, spelling, then poetry by Marianne Moore, all these poems, they deal with art and its creation, the conflict that a woman faces, a woman artist faces. And this poem is also deals with such a theme, art and the conflict that a woman faces in society. She uses very strong and very powerful images and metaphors throughout the poem to bring forth the idea that a woman is made to choose. Either she can be an artist, or she can be a mother, or she cannot. The society will not allow a woman to have family life, to be a mother, to have a child, and at the same time write whatever she wants to express freely. She don't have that freedom to express herself. The society denies that freedom to a woman. And if you want to write, you can, but you cannot have a child. This is the main argument that runs through the poem. Let's see the poem, and I want you to turn to page 69. Spelling by Atwood, Margaret Atwood. She begins with the image of her daughter playing with blocks, blocks blocks of different colors where certain letters are inscribed, where certain cubes and other blocks that kids play, small children play. So let's read the poem and let's see how Margaret Atwood brings forth the idea of art and its creation, the conflict that a woman faces, a woman artist faces. Turn to page 69. Spelling by Margaret Atwood. My daughter plays on the floor with plastic letters, red, blue and hard yellow, learning how to spell, spelling how to make spells. I wonder how many women denied themselves daughters, closed themselves in rooms, drew the curtains so they could mainline words. A child is not a poem is not a child. There is no either or. However, I return to the story of the woman caught in the war and in labor, her thighs tied together by the enemy so she could not give birth. Ancestress, the burning witch, her mouth covered by leather to strangle words. A word after a word after a word is power. At the point where language falls away from the hot bones, at the point where the rock breaks open and darkness flows out of it like blood, at the melting point of granite when the bones know they are hollow, and the word splits and doubles and speaks the truth and the body itself becomes a mouth. This is a metaphor. How do you learn to spell? Blood, sky, and the sun. Your own name first. Your first name. Your first name. Your first word. So the poem begins with the image of the poet's daughter playing with plastic letters. So she herself finds herself fortunate to have a child, and as well as to write, express herself. And she says, she wants to convey this message. She says her daughter is playing with the plastic letters, the blocks of different colors, and she's learning how to spell how to write words, how to spell. And she says spelling, how to make spells, and the spelling, these words, it has the power to cast spell. It has the power to create a new reality, because the language creates reality. So it has the power to cast spells. She uses this word spell. She makes it's a fun that she uses with this word spell. So first spell, she is actually trying to learn how to spell things, and then she says, when you have that ability to spell words, to say something, then you can cast spells. It's powerful as a spell. The spell which is powerful, that has been, again, that this, throughout we find this image of witches and witchcraft, because in olden times, many women who had the ability, who had the potential to write, who were very strong, they were branded as witches and they were killed, burnt at stake. So throughout we find that image also. So here she says, if you have the power, if you have the ability to spell, then you have the ability, power to cast spell, to create a new reality, to thrust a new reality upon the society. I wonder how many women denied themselves daughter. So the main argument comes in. She contemplates. She don't know the number of women who denied themselves daughter. Like the Bronte sisters or any other writers. Maybe Emily Dickinson. They all led a very lonely life. They were literally recluse. Moved away from the society, moved away from family life so that they could write. Because if they are writing, they couldn't, the society refused to allow them, refuse them normal family life with husband, children, and so on. So she contemplates, I wonder how many women deny themselves daughters, closed themselves in rooms. They led a very reclusive life, drew the curtains so they could mainline words. They can enjoy something without restriction. Enjoy the power of words to create something creatively. So, but at the same time, when they chose to write, they had to forego, or they have to deny themselves family life, especially children. A child is not a poem, and a poem is not a child. So the main message comes here. So you cannot say either you can have a child or you can have a poem or you can express yourself. It's not like that. It's not either or. Because maybe in Virginia Woolf's essay that you are going to learn, a room of one's own, that extract from a room of one's own, Shakespeare's sister, the same argument is repeated. Right from the Elizabethan times, you don't find any women writers. Why? It's not because the women of those times lacked potential, lacked creativity. It's not like that, but they were denied because this is the reason. They can have a child, but not a poem. And if you want to have a literary career, if you want to write a poem, then you can't have a family, you can't have a child. But Margaret Atwood says, a child is not a poem and a poem is not a child. And there is no either or. But however, that is what we see in the society usually. I return to the story of the woman caught in the war and in labor. Her thighs tied together by the enemy, so she could not give birth. So she moves back to the image during the Second World War, when many women were raped and killed by the soldiers, and these soldiers, after they tied their legs so that when they were during the labor, when they were about to give birth, they tied the legs of those women so that they would not give birth, and finally they would die. And so this is the image that Margaret Atwood brings in. And she says, likewise, women of our times, they are also strangled, their words are strangled, their voice is stifled, and they don't get the opportunity to express themselves. Like the woman who is caught in the war and in labor, and she wants to give birth, she wants to express herself, but here, giving birth is compared, or it's symbolic of expressing oneself. Uh, the creativity is being, this giving birth and creativity both are compared. She says, both are something creative, and they are denied this. So she could not give birth. The enemy, the soldiers, they tied their legs, and symbolically they tied their mouth so that they won't speak out, because speech is powerful. The word is power. Then she moves on to the image of burning witches who were burnt at stake. Ancestors, especially Mary Webster, who was hunted down and burnt at stake. Ancestors, the burning witch, her mouth covered by leather to strangle words. So this is it. They were killed and their mouth was strangled, covered by leather, so that voice won't come out. The burning witches who are burnt at stake. Virginia Woolf also talks about the same thing, how these women who had creativity, who were skillful, they were branded as witches, branded as old hag, who is strange, who is psychic, and finally they were killed. They were not accepted in the mainstream society. At the point, all right, also leather to strangle words. Then she says the main message again. A word after a word after a word is power, and that is why that voice is stifled, so that the women will be denied power, so that they lack the power to express themselves, to assert themselves. And if they open their mouth, if they use their voice, then they can assert their identity, they can create a new reality, but that is denied. The voice of women is considered a threat to the society, and that's why her words are strangled. At the point where language falls away from hold bonds, at the point where the rope breaks open, so again, when these women are killed, burnt at stake, the language falls apart, their voice is also stifled, the language, just is being, it is being taken away from that woman. But what happens is that, like birth, again, this creativity is compared to a woman giving birth, where from the womb the child comes out along with a gush of blood. Likewise, the words also pour out from these women. Flows out of it like blood at the melting point of granite, when the bones know they are hollow. So hollow, and the word splits and doubles and speaks the truth. So at that point, during the childbirth, the child comes out along with the gush of blood and everything. Similarly, with that pain, with that gush of blood and sacrifice, because this blood and everything that stands is symbolic of sacrifice that a woman has to face, a female writer has to face, and the sacrifice that she has to make. So with that, the word comes out, like the child comes out of the womb, the word comes out, and it splits and doubles and speaks the truth from the body. It's the body that speaks the truth, and it becomes the mouth. Our body itself becomes the mouth, gives the message to the society. And then she emphasized, Margaret Atwood emphasizing, this is a metaphor. This is a metaphor for a woman writing, woman's potential to write, and how it is denied, and how it is being compared to the process of giving birth.
After asserting the metaphors of childbirth and witches being burnt at stake, Atwood goes back to the initial image of the child learning how to spell and says, "How do you learn to spell blood, sky, and the sun? Your own name first. Your first name, that's your first word." So the poet Atwood says, how do you spell? She asks a question, and then she answers. The child learns to spell sky, sun, blood, and so on. But the poet says it's not those words that you are supposed to spell first. It's your own name. So that, it's like reclaiming your own lost self, reclaiming your identity. So your own name first, your first naming, and that makes all the difference. Because from post-structuralist point of view, language creates reality, and the reality that is entrusted upon us, upon women, is patriarchal, and it is tainted by patriarchal ideology. But when you name first, when you learn to spell, she actually emphasizes the use of female language, purely female language, and écriture feminine. So your own first name should be the word that you should learn first. You should spell first. That should be your first word, so that it will help you assert your own identity rather than accepting the identity entrusted by the patriarchal society. So this is how the poem goes. She juxtaposes the innocent image of a child playing with alphabets, learning how to spell, and then she moves on to talk about how women sacrificed their personal life to lead a professional life, and how women were forced to give up their life, how they were burnt at stake, how their creativity is stifled by the patriarchal society, who cannot accept the voice of women, who thinks that the voice of women think it as a threat. So, and then she ends the poem with the same image of the child playing over the letters, learning how to spell. So, shall we read the poem once again? And please connect with these images. My daughter plays on the floor with plastic letters, red, blue, and hard yellow, learning how to spell, spelling how to make spells. I wonder how many women denied themselves daughters, closed themselves in rooms, drew the curtains so they could mainline words. A child is not a poem is not a child. There is no either or. However, I return to the story of the woman caught in the war and in labor, her thighs tied together by the enemy so she could not give birth, ancestress, the burning witch, her mouth covered by leather to strangle words. A word after a word after a word is power. At the point where language falls away from the hoard bonds, at the point where the rock breaks open and darkness flows out of it like blood, at the melting point of granite, when the bones know they are hollow, and the word splits and doubles and speaks the truth, and the body itself becomes a mouth. This is a metaphor. How do you learn to spell blood, sky, and the sun? Your own name first, your first naming, your first name, your first word. So this is the poem Spelling by Atwood. And I hope you have followed the reading. And if you have any doubts, you can post in Google Classroom or ask me in the WhatsApp group. Thank you. Have a nice day.